Welcome. We often look outwards to identify danger, pointing to external threats or malicious intent in others. But what if the most insidious dangers, the ones that cause the most widespread and often unconscious harm, originate from a place much closer to home? What if they reside within the unexplored territories of our own minds? Carl Jung, a pioneering psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, dedicated his life to understanding the vast, often turbulent inner landscape of the human psyche. He posited that true peril doesn't always announce itself with a roar, but often whispers from the shadows of our own unawareness. Jung once wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." This profound statement hints at the core of our exploration today. We are going to investigate what Jung considered to be one of the most dangerous human tendencies, a pattern of being that, when unaddressed, can lead individuals to inflict considerable damage, not only upon themselves but also upon those around them, and even society at large. What is this specific behavior, this internal state that Jung warned us about? And how can understanding it illuminate the path to a more conscious and less harmful existence? If you're ready to explore the depths of human nature and uncover insights that can transform your understanding of yourself and others, then join us. And if these questions already stir something within you, be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the wisdom of psychology and self-discovery. Let's begin to unravel this crucial insight from Carl Jung. To truly understand the nature of the danger we're discussing, we must first delve into Carl Jung's revolutionary concept of the unconscious. For Jung, the psyche was not merely the conscious mind, the part of us that is aware and engaged with the world. He proposed that beneath this surface layer lies a vast, powerful, and largely unknown territory, the unconscious. This isn't just a dusty attic of forgotten memories or repressed desires, though that is part of it, which he termed the personal unconscious. Jung went further, identifying a deeper layer, the collective unconscious, a reservoir of ancestral experiences, instincts, and universal patterns he called archetypes. Think of the conscious mind as a small island, and the unconscious as the immense deep ocean surrounding and supporting it. Now, why is this vast, unseen realm potentially dangerous? Jung observed that what remains unconscious does not remain inert. It actively influences our thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and behaviors, often in ways we don't recognize. As Jung famously stated, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is a critical point. When significant aspects of ourselves, our unacknowledged fears, our rejected traits, our unfulfilled potentials, are relegated to the unconscious, they don't simply disappear. Instead, they can gain a kind of autonomous power, erupting unexpectedly or subtly steering our lives towards outcomes we might consciously deplore. Imagine a ship navigating treacherous waters with a broken rudder unknowingly pulled by strong invisible currents. The captain, representing the conscious mind, might believe they are in full control, yet the ship is at the mercy of these hidden forces. These forces, when unacknowledged and unintegrated, are where the hidden dangers lie. They can lead to misunderstandings, to self-sabotage, to irrational reactions, and, as we will explore, to behaviors that can be profoundly harmful to oneself and others. The unconscious, in Jung's view, holds both immense creative potential and significant destructive capacity. Its dangers arise primarily from our ignorance of its contents and its power. So what is this specific dangerous tendency that Jung so gravely warned against? It is, fundamentally, the profound and pervasive ignorance of one's own personal shadow. Carl Jung described the shadow as the dark side of our personality, the sum of all those unpleasant qualities we like to hide, together with the insufficiently developed functions and the contents of the personal unconscious. It's crucial to understand that the shadow isn't inherently evil. Rather, it's composed of those aspects of ourselves that our conscious ego has rejected or repressed, often because they were deemed unacceptable by our family, society, or our own developing self-image. These might include traits like selfishness, aggression, greed, envy, laziness, or insecurity, but also, paradoxically, positive qualities that we were taught to suppress, such as assertiveness in someone taught to be overly compliant, or creativity in a rigidly conventional environment. The Formation of the shadow begins early in life. As children, we learn which behaviors earn approval and which lead to disapproval or punishment. We naturally strive for acceptance and love, so we begin to push away the parts of ourselves that seem to threaten these connections. This is a normal part of psychological development and the formation of the persona, the social mask we present to the world. However, Jung emphasized that these disowned parts don't simply vanish, they accumulate in the unconscious, forming the shadow. The more we deny or repress these aspects, the denser and more powerful the shadow becomes. Jung stated, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. The danger, therefore, lies not in having a shadow, for everyone does, but in remaining ignorant of it. This ignorance allows the shadow to operate autonomously, influencing our behavior without our conscious consent. It's like having an unacknowledged co-pilot who occasionally grabs the controls, steering us into trouble. When we are unaware of our own shadow, we are blind to our own potential for negativity, our own prejudices, our own hidden motivations. This blindness is the this that makes individuals, in Jung's view, particularly dangerous, because they are acting out impulses and traits they don't even recognize as their own. Have you ever been utterly baffled by someone's intense, seemingly irrational reaction to a situation, or perhaps even by your own? It's often the shadow at play, triggered and expressing itself. Recognizing this internal dynamic is the first step away from its perilous influence. Now that we've identified this danger as the ignorance of our personal shadow, the critical question becomes, how does this internal unawareness manifest externally? How does it actually cause harm? One of the primary and most insidious ways, according to Carl Jung, is through the psychological mechanism of projection. Jung described projection as an unconscious process, whereby we attribute aspects of our own psyche, particularly those unacknowledged shadow elements, onto other people or external situations. In essence, what we fail to see or accept in ourselves, we readily perceive and often condemn in others. Jung wrote in The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, projection is one of the commonest psychic phenomena. Everything that is unconscious in ourselves we discover in our neighbor, and we treat him accordingly. Imagine someone who carries a great deal of unacknowledged anger and resentment within their shadow. They might consciously see themselves as a calm and fair person. However, this repressed anger doesn't just disappear. Instead, they might constantly perceive others as being aggressive, unfair, or hostile towards them. They are, in effect, projecting their own inner state onto the external world. The colleague who offers constructive criticism might be seen as attacking them. The driver who makes a minor mistake on the road becomes a symbol of societal aggression. Think of it like a movie projector. The film reel, our unconscious shadow content, is inside the projector, our psyche, but the image appears on the external screen, other people or situations. This is where the creation of external enemies begins. When individuals are deeply unconscious of their shadow, they are prone to finding scapegoats. The other, be it an individual, a group, or even an entire nation, becomes the convenient hook upon which to hang all of their disowned negativity. The faults they cannot bear to see in themselves are magnified in this external enemy. This allows the individual to maintain a sense of righteousness and moral superiority, all while unconsciously acting out their own darkness. For example, a person riddled with insecurity but unwilling to face it might relentlessly criticize others for their perceived weaknesses, thereby bolstering their own fragile ego. Or someone struggling with their own unacknowledged greed might accuse everyone else of being materialistic and selfish. This mechanism of projection is profoundly dangerous because it distorts reality. The person operating under heavy shadow projection isn't interacting with actual people. They're interacting with the disfigured reflections of their own inner world. This leads to misunderstandings, baseless accusations, broken relationships, and on a larger scale, prejudice, discrimination, and conflict. The ideally dangerous person, in this Jungian sense, is the one who is constantly fighting battles with externalized versions of their own internal demons. completely unaware that the source of the conflict lies within. Have you ever noticed a pattern in the types of people or behaviors that intensely irritate you? Jung would suggest that such strong reactions often point to a projected part of your own shadow. When ignorance of the shadow, or this dangerous tendency, persists and deepens, it can lead to a particularly perilous psychological state that Carl Jung termed inflation. Inflation, in the Jungian sense, refers to an expansion of the personality beyond its proper limits, a state where the ego identifies with an archetype, or more commonly in this context, with a sense of its own exaggerated importance, righteousness or perfection, precisely because it is so, cut off from its shadow. Because the individual denies their own flaws and darkness, they may develop a grandiose self-image, believing themselves to be superior, infallible, or uniquely enlightened. Jung noted that inflation is a regression of consciousness into the unconscious. In this state, the ego is essentially possessed by unconscious contents, mistaking them for its own superior qualities. This inflated state breeds arrogance and delusion. The person who is inflated due to shadow denial often lacks self-awareness and empathy. They are unable to see their own contributions to problems, always blaming others or external circumstances. Their pronouncements can become dogmatic, their judgments harsh, and their capacity for genuine self-reflection virtually non-existent. They might present themselves as paragons of virtue, while ironically their unacknowledged shadow wreaks havoc through their actions and attitudes. Consider a leader, whether in a small group or a large organization, who refuses to acknowledge any personal failings or mistakes. They might become tyrannical, intolerant of dissent, and make disastrous decisions based on a delusional sense of their own wisdom, all while projecting their incompetence or insecurities onto their subordinates. Jung saw this as a dangerous dissociation. The conscious personality becomes increasingly one-sided and unrealistic, while the repressed shadow gains more power in the unconscious. A classic example of this could be a highly moralistic individual who publicly condemns others for perceived sins, yet secretly engages in the very behaviors they denounce. Their public persona is inflated with a sense of moral purity, but this is only possible because they have so thoroughly repressed and projected their own sinful impulses. This creates a dangerous disconnect. As Jung pointed out, every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol or morphine or idealism. In this context, the addiction is to a false sense of self, an inflated ego propped up by the denial of the shadow. Such individuals are often resistant to feedback, as any criticism threatens to puncture their inflated self-image and expose the terrifying emptiness or darkness they have refused to confront. They live in a kind of psychological bubble, and when that bubble is threatened, their reactions can be disproportionately aggressive or defensive. This inflated state, fueled by shadow ignorance, makes people not only difficult to deal with but also capable of inflicting significant harm, often under the guise of righteousness or superiority. What examples of such inflated states, perhaps on a smaller or larger scale, have you observed in the world or even in moments within yourself? Sharing these reflections can help us all understand this dynamic better. The danger of individual unawareness of the shadow, this crucial blind spot, doesn't remain confined to personal relationships or individual well-being. Carl Jung was deeply concerned with its collective impact, how the accumulation of individual shadow projections and inflations can fuel widespread societal harm. He lived through 2 world wars and keenly observed how mass movements and destructive ideologies could take hold. Jung argued that large-scale societal problems such as war, prejudice, and political polarization often have their roots in the collective projection of the shadow. He wrote in The Undiscovered Self, the psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. That is to say, when the individual remains undivided and does not become conscious of his inner opposite, the world must perforce act out the conflict and be torn into opposing halves. When large numbers of people in a society are ignorant of their personal shadows, they become susceptible to leaders or ideologies that offer them convenient external enemies onto whom they can project their collective anxieties, frustrations, and disowned darkness. Think of how easily propaganda can take hold when it taps into these unconscious shadow elements. A group is demonized, portrayed as the source of all problems, and the individuals within the society feel a sense of unity and righteousness in opposing this enemy. In reality, they are often fighting an externalized battle against their own collective shadow. Jung saw this dynamic play out tragically in the rise of totalitarian regimes, where the shadow of an entire nation was projected onto minority groups or enemy states, leading to horrific atrocities. Consider, for instance, persistent societal issues like systemic racism or deep-seated political divides. From a Jungian perspective, these can be seen at least in part as manifestations of a collective shadow. The other group is imbued with all the negative qualities that the dominant group refuses to acknowledge in itself. This allows for the perpetuation of injustice and conflict, as genuine dialogue and understanding are replaced by blame and demonization. The more individuals within a society fail to do their own inner work of confronting their personal shadows, the more fertile the ground becomes for these collective shadow projections to take root and flourish. Jung believed that the only true antidote to this collective danger was individual consciousness. He stated, "The world hangs on a thin thread, and that is the psyche of man. If enough individuals undertake the difficult task of integrating their own shadows, it reduces the amount of unconscious material available for collective projection. Therefore, the personal inner work of becoming aware of this, our own shadow, is not merely a matter of individual psychological health. It is, for Jung, a vital contribution to the health and sanity of society as a whole." What collective societal issues today do you think might be fueled by this kind of mass shadow projection? Reflecting on this can be unsettling, but it's a crucial step in understanding the scale of the problem Jung identified. Beyond the external harm caused by projection and inflation and the societal damage from collective shadow ignorance, there's another profound danger stemming from this unawareness of our shadow: the tragedy of the unlived life. Carl Jung spoke powerfully about the psychological cost of not embracing the totality of oneself, including the shadow. When we consistently deny or repress significant parts of our personality, we are in essence refusing to live out our full potential. These unlived aspects, the passions we suppressed, the talents we ignored, the parts of ourselves we deemed too risky or unacceptable, don't just fade away. They fester in the unconscious, often leading to a sense of emptiness, meaninglessness, or chronic dissatisfaction. Jung observed, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Yet, he also recognized that failing to do so leads to a different kind of terror, the quiet despair of a life not fully embraced. The unlived life often manifests as a persistent feeling that something is missing, a nagging restlessness, or even physical symptoms that have no clear medical cause. It can lead to midlife crises, where the suppressed parts of the personality erupt with force, demanding attention. Imagine someone who, due to familial or societal pressure, pursued a sensible career, suppressing a deep artistic passion. For years they might function adequately, even successfully, but a part of their soul remains dormant. This unlived artistic self, residing in the shadow, can create a growing sense of frustration, envy of those who pursued their art, or even depression. Jung believed that the psyche strives for wholeness, and when parts of it are systematically excluded from conscious life, it creates a state of inner tension and dis-ease. Furthermore, the energy that would have been channeled into these unlived aspects can turn sour and destructive. For instance, unexpressed creativity might curdle into bitter criticism of others' creative endeavors. Unacknowledged ambition might manifest as manipulative behavior. Jung noted that what you resist persists. By resisting the integration of our shadow, which often contains these unlived potentials, we inadvertently give it more power to disrupt our lives negatively. The unlived life, therefore, is dangerous, not only because it diminishes our own experience of vitality and fulfillment, but also because the frustrated energy of these disowned parts can leak out in harmful ways, impacting our relationships and choices. It's a form of self-sabotage born from the fear of embracing our complete selves. Jung suggested that the psyche will often try to bring these unlived parts to our attention through dreams, synchronicities, or even crises, urging us towards a more complete and authentic existence. Have you ever felt a persistent pull towards something you've long ignored or suppressed? That could be the call of your unlived life, an invitation from your shadow to become more whole. If this video is helping you to understand yourself better or to see the world in a new way, please consider following the channel. It helps us continue to bring this kind of content to you. Given the profound dangers associated with ignorance of the shadow, this pervasive unawareness, Carl Jung did not leave us without a path forward. The I-guard solution, in his view, lies in the courageous and ongoing process of conscious integration. This means actively working to bring the contents of the personal shadow into conscious awareness, acknowledging them, understanding their origins, and ultimately integrating them into a more whole and balanced personality. Jung referred to this journey as part of the broader process of individuation, the lifelong psychological development towards becoming a unique, indivisible whole, one's true self. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This making conscious of the darkness is the essence of shadow work. How does one embark on this path of conscious integration? It begins with radical self-honesty and a willingness to look at the aspects of ourselves we'd rather ignore. This often involves paying close attention to our projections. As Jung pointed out, those qualities in others that trigger strong negative emotional reactions in us often provide valuable clues to our own disowned shadow traits. If you find yourself consistently irritated by someone's perceived arrogance, for example, Jungian psychology would invite you to explore whether there's a touch of unacknowledged arrogance, or perhaps its opposite, a deep-seated insecurity within your own shadow. Dream analysis is another powerful tool Jung advocated. Dreams, he believed, are messages from the unconscious, often presenting shadow figures or scenarios that can help us understand what we have repressed. Journaling, honest self-reflection, and sometimes the guidance of a therapist trained in depth psychology can also be invaluable. The goal is not to eliminate the shadow, for it is an integral part of us, but to understand it, to withdraw our projections, and to reclaim the energy and potential locked within it. This can mean accepting our capacity for anger, selfishness, or fear, not to act them out indiscriminately, but to manage them consciously and to understand their roots. It can also mean uncovering golden shadow aspects, positive qualities like creativity, assertiveness, or vulnerability that we may have disowned. For instance, someone who repressed their assertiveness might learn to integrate it in a healthy way, becoming more capable of setting boundaries and pursuing their goals without becoming aggressive. This process of conscious integration is not easy. It requires courage, humility, and sustained effort. As Jung stated, the confrontation with the shadow is a moral task of the first order. It means taking responsibility for our inner world, rather than blaming others for our discomfort or our failings. However, the rewards, according to Jung, are immense. Integrating the shadow leads to greater self-awareness, authenticity, and psychological wholeness. It reduces the likelihood of harmful projections and inflated states. It frees up psychic energy that was previously used for repression, leading to increased vitality and creativity. By becoming more conscious of our own darkness, we become less dangerous to ourselves and to others, and more capable of genuine compassion and understanding. This journey of integration is the Jungian antidote to this dangerous state of unawareness, offering a path towards becoming a more complete and responsible human being. So, we've journeyed through some deep and perhaps challenging territories of the human psyche, guided by the insights of Carl Jung. We've seen that the this, which makes people, in Jung's view, most dangerous, is not some external, easily identifiable evil, but rather the pervasive and often unacknowledged ignorance of their own personal shadow. This internal blindness, as Jung described, is the fertile ground from which projection, the creation of external enemies, inflated states of arrogance and delusion, and the tragic waste of an unlived life can spring. Moreover, we've touched upon how this individual unawareness can accumulate, fueling significant societal harm. But Jung's psychology is not one of despair. It is fundamentally a psychology of hope and transformation. The path away from this danger, as he meticulously outlined, is through the courageous, ongoing work of conscious integration. It's about turning inwards, withdrawing our projections, and daring to meet those disowned parts of ourselves with understanding and acceptance. Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, This process of becoming, which includes embracing our shadow, is what moves us from being unconsciously driven and potentially harmful to being more whole, more responsible, and ultimately more truly ourselves. The journey of confronting the shadow is indeed a profound undertaking, one that requires honesty and perseverance. But it is also a journey that promises greater authenticity, deeper relationships, and a more meaningful existence. It is the path towards reclaiming the lost parts of our soul and contributing to a more conscious world. What are your thoughts on this? Has this exploration of Jung's ideas about the shadow and its dangers resonated with your own experiences or observations? If you've had any insights, or if a particular aspect of this discussion struck a chord, please share your reflections in the comments below. We learn so much from each other's journeys, and of course, if you found this exploration valuable, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with anyone you think might also benefit from these profound Jungian insights. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.